Awesome. So what we're going to do today is we're going to shift perspective, and I'm going to have a conversation about managing the Autodesk Construction Cloud and managing the project ecosystem from like the BIM manager standpoint, with a focus on the project template. There's going to be a little bit mixed in there for just general account management and like some things I've learned, just some lessons I've learned, more painful than others sometimes, about like how best to go about managing the Autodesk Construction Cloud as it grows. We're going to hit on a couple core topics like setting up your folder structure, managing permissions. We're going to get into what you can and can't set up with the design collaboration module. And then we'll wrap it up with just some of the things that I've learned that I think would be valuable for other team members that are getting into the Autodesk Construction Cloud.
All right, let's get going. So do you want to share a screen?
Let me go ahead and kick this off. We'll hit the start slideshow. You got to have a first cover slide. So in case you forgot where you were or who I am, I'm Dan Warren. I'm happy to be here on BIM Pure. That's my email address. Please feel free to reach out to me. Unless you were trying to sell me something, then just go ahead and hit me up on LinkedIn.
All right. So I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. So if any of you have questions, I'll be fielding them and filtering a bit.
Yeah. Just as a disclaimer here, I have a lot of strengths in this world. PowerPoints are not one of them. So you'll find that my PowerPoints tend to be very bare bones. And if anyone is interested, I am prepared to like switch from PowerPoints to go to actual live demonstration. Since the Autodesk Construction Cloud is currently working, we can go ahead and actually do some live presentations. Yeah, it was down yesterday. Okay, so we talked about this briefly, the agenda. Why do we want to make a template? We talk about the values of going through template creation. Talk about the company's roles and users. We're going to focus on docs and design collaboration. Then we're going to get into some tips and tricks in BIM 360 versus Autodesk Construction Cloud, and some of the key things you'll need to know along the way. So first off, why would you want to build a template? The number one reason is consistency. If you're a firm of any meaningful size, over like about 100 people that's standardized on the Autodesk Construction Cloud, you're going to find your ecosystem just populated with hundreds of projects. Those projects could be formal engagements, or they could actually just be early development projects like proposals or pursuits or things like that. But the purpose of creating the template is to provide that folder structure consistently, just like you would on your local server for your firm. You wouldn't want people to just willy-nilly be able to create their own folder structures, because then it just sort of turns into this disorganized mess of folders and data, and nobody can really find anything. It also provides consistency in permissions and how permissions are applied to the project on the start. So you know that if a user has trouble getting into a project, or if a user is having issues, they generally went in and touched your permissions, which you worked really hard to make sure it would work right out the gate, and then it makes actual troubleshooting a bit easier. And it streamlines access to your projects, because your users could just follow a very simple process for adding external team members, and it will generally just work if you've put a little bit of time up front. Same thing with like the project startup process. Streamlines it, makes it straightforward. If your BIM team is spinning up all your projects, or if you're empowering your project admins to spin up their own projects, you want a nice consistent process. So once that's consistent, it goes faster. It also expedites training, because you're only having to train on one sort of data set. And it reduces access errors and permission errors, right? Everything is consistently built. And then the final thing I like to put in there is, as with anything that gets standardized, standardizations are, in my opinion, the foundation for innovation. So once the fences are in place, you really learn how to play inside the ballpark, which is why I think it's really important to have a consistent structure and rules on how to use the specific tools, because it facilitates your designers are smart people. They'll figure out good ways to get value out of the tool if you just give them a few borders. So we're going to go into like, how do you actually create a template? It's a three or four step process that we're going to go through, and it starts with like actually creating the template, which seems silly, but that's actually the first step, is you create your template. Then you configure the permissions for the template itself. Then you configure your products, which is what we're going to spend a chunk of time on today. And then you actually publish the template. And publishing the template is what makes it active for project admins to create templates, like to create projects from your template. So let's go into step one, is the creation of the template. So in the Autodesk Construction Cloud, there is an actual template button that you click on to create a template. And when you go to create a template, it's very similar to creating a project. This pops up. It says, do you want to create a template blank, or do you want to create a template from an existing project? This is not that different from like creating a template from Revit. You can either create a Revit template from scratch, or you can create a Revit template from an existing project. There's a bit of a trade-off here. I recommend, if you're getting started, start with an existing project. You probably have like one project that you're currently working on somewhere, especially if you're in a conversation or a webinar about creating templates. You've probably created at least a project in your lifetime. So you can refine those settings and then just use that project to create your next template. That's really good if you're like a power user and like an admin that also does production. You can refine your process in project and then push it out, versus like creating a blank template where you're starting from scratch and everything has to be programmed from the ground up. The advantage to create the template from the existing project is all those settings for your project get copied over, and that basically creates the foundation of your next project. And we'll talk about some of the stuff that does and does not get copied over when you create a project, when you create a template from a project. So I've created this template. It's called inspections. And the first step when you create a template, you give it a name, and then the next step is you configure the permissions for the template. Now, this is a unique window. This is specific to the template itself. This permissions window, when you first create a template, defines who can create a project from this template. It does not define who gets added to the template. So you can create a small team, or like you can empower a BIM manager that's in a department to create the projects for that team or that department. If you actually want to control like who gets added to the project automatically when you create the template, you have to go to the little project picker dropdown and pick project admin. And then in the members tab, this is where I can define, all right, when I create a new project, who gets added to that project and what products do they get access to? And that's as simple as just adding a user like you typically would. Just enter their email address, set their company, set their role, define their access level, and turn on products. Once this is set, every time you spin up this project, those users get added. So we use this because we have a support team of BIM managers that need to be on every single project in the firm. So every time we spin up a project, all 4 of those users get added to every single Autodesk Construction Cloud project. And it automates that, it makes support much easier, and it allows us to like just get in and out as needed really quickly for support and troubleshooting purposes.
Yeah, just a quick one. Does that mean that you have multiple template in this case? One that would add the admins and other one for general, it's all in the same template regardless?
So yeah, that's a great question, Nick. So it's a decision you have to make as a firm. And one of the things I say is you define the process, then you define the product. So we currently use one template for everything. So that template, when a project team submits a startup request, we go in and we spin up the project for them and we add the users. We do some back-end stuff, of which I'll show you a little bit later. And then that is consistent for the entire firm. Now we are learning that there are specific firms, like in our highway inspections group and our facilities assessment group, that they need some tweaks to our base configuration that is just enough to facilitate, okay, like they're going to use Autodesk Build on those products. So we're going to use our Autodesk Build kind of focused template for those teams because it has a whole different folder structure set up. It has all our Autodesk Build backend baked into it. So like you can have multiple templates, and I think it's just like a Revit template, right? You can have, the point of a template is tool it to support a specific process or team, and different teams can work different ways. But with enough effort, you can have like one data structure template that supports all of your projects or most of your projects, depending on the complexity of your services and the team you work with. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the next step after you configure your template permissions, you define who can create a project for the template. You define who's going to be in it, is to set the notifications. And I put this one up front before people like start zoning out, because this is really, really important unless you want to make a lot of enemies really fast. So the Autodesk Construction Cloud is absolutely 100% not afraid to spam your inbox with notifications. And some of these notifications, as you can see, like next to the cost there, are set to instantaneous, right? So that means if you do anything in the cost module that is assigned to that user, they instantly get a notification. Issues is another one. If you use the issues, which I highly encourage everyone to get into using the issues module, it will send a notification by default every time you assign a user a notification. So if you're QCing a set and you're putting a lot of issues in a document, every time you assign that intern an issue, it emails them. So I recommend you go in there into those frequencies and you adjust them. So if it sends an hourly report as opposed to like instantaneously. We completely angered one of our external consultants when we first turned this on, because we started going in and assigning issues, and we didn't realize that like there were like 3 of us sending issues, and we sent them like 70 something emails like in the span of like 20 minutes. So just a heads up, you want to make sure that you get your notifications dialed in. The next thing is also notification permissions. You can control if an end user can change their notifications. So if you don't want somebody to be able to opt out of specific notifications, you can change this from manage to view. And that just means when the user is assigned that notification group, they can't change that specific notification. So if you want them to know every hour on the hour what issues you've assigned to them, or if they have a submittal due or something like that, they can't opt out of it. Additionally, I do recommend creating a notification group for opting out. And this is pretty straightforward. Like, this might be a good time for me to go live on this one, because it's kind of hard to understand in the abstract. So let me see here. Let me switch to my ACC template, and I'm going to go to, here we go, my notifications. So the notification group on the left here, so this is your default one, but you can create additional groups. So I always create an additional group called opt out that has all the notifications turned off. And this is because I spin up a lot of projects that I don't necessarily need any other information other than the project is live and the team will reach out to me if they need help. If you look closely over here on the far right, the default setting for this is all members of your project. So all members, when they're added, are default added to this default notification setting. But you can create a new notification group, and we'll call this one, opt out to. And then you can set this to companies or roles. So I'm going to come in here and let's say I'm the BIM manager. I really don't need to be notified of things. Then when I create this role, or when I create this group, anyone that has that BIM manager role will be put in this opt-out group. So your roles are extremely important in understanding like how different things function at the actual project level.
So just a quick one. What kind of notification have you found the most helpful to people? Like, are there some notifications that people actually like receiving, or do you find them to be spammy most of the time?
Well, I assume other people